Hey guys, I hope you all had a great weekend. And before I start this video, there was something I wanted to address. I'm sure a lot of you noticed that Mr. Nighmare put out a video stating that his mom has cancer. He's going to be taking a brief break from YouTube, but during that time, I think it'd be nice if we could go show him some support. And I highly recommend that if you don't have anything to watch or anything to do, head over to his channel and check out his videos and see if maybe there's one you might have missed. Even if you may have seen all his videos already, leave him a comment letting him know you're still supporting him. I'm also sure a lot of you noticed he got a really nasty email from someone. He didn't say who it was, and I kinda wish he would have. A lot of us smaller channels are getting a lot of accusations thrown our way. And I can honestly tell you, it wasn't me, it wasn't Corpse Husband, it wasn't B-Busta, and it wasn't Lazy Masquerade. I'm not even going to try to throw a guess out there, because there's no proof of any of it, and it could really hurt an innocent channel. And I'm not a child doing that. This isn't high school, and we should be spreading rumors. If Mr. Nighmare wanted us to know who it was, he would have told us. I think we all took the wrong part of his video. We need to be showing him support, not starting a mob. And without any further ado, let's get into today's video. The following is a true scary story, found on the subreddit Let's Not Meet. I'll have a link in the description if you'd like to read along with me. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you can catch all of my future content. Let's begin. When I was 19, I was a venture scout. Sorta like Boy Scouts, only for older kids, and it's gender mixed. I decided to go to this week-long mixed scouting crew camping trip with a friend of mine. But a few days before the trip, my friend from Venture Scout bailed. So I'd be going up into the mountains alone with a bunch of strangers, which was no big deal for me. I can handle myself. When I got there, I was the only Venture Scout, and the only girl. It was a little awkward, but most of the Boy Scouts were pretty nice, and easy to get along with. Although they weren't used to camping with a girl, they happily accepted me as just one of the guys. But there was this one guy, Danny. From the first day of camp, he wouldn't take his eyes off me. He'd just stare at me. It was a little uncomfortable, yeah, but I figured he was just socially inept with girls or something, and I tried not to pay him any mind. The next day, while we were hiking, we all split off into pairs, and it turned out I was paired with Danny. He looked a little too excited about the idea of hiking alone with me. His eyes always seemed a little too wide, a bit crazed looking, but he was a small guy. He had unkempt hair, and was a little shorter than I was at 5'7", and I figured I'd be able to take him in a fight if he did try anything, so I didn't raise a fuss about it. Before setting out to the hike, he kept asking me if I needed help putting on my sunscreen. Even though I kept declining, he kept pushing the question and trying to put sunscreen on me, until one of the guys told him to cut it out. While we were hiking together, he kept probing me. "How old are you?" he'd ask. 19, almost 20, I'd reply. "Oh, don't lie. You must be 14 or something. You're so innocent." Young, innocent girls are always the cutest. He kept asking me innocent enough questions, like where I lived, if I had siblings, and what my favorite color was. But then he started asking me if I knew what BDSM was. I was taken aback by this, and was more than a little uncomfortable, so I'd pretend to not know what he was talking about, all while trying to give as many cues as possible for him to drop the subject. But he then started going on what BDSM was, about tying girls up, about hitting them and burning them. At this point, I was freaking out a little bit, but keeping my cool. I didn't want to show him my distress, any chinks in my armor, as I knew he'd probably get off by making me squirm. The only thought I could think was, what the fuck? Seriously, what the fuck? As I kept my eyes fixed on the path ahead of me. Then, he started complimenting my skin. "You don't see a lot of girls with pale skin. Do you use moisturizer?" he'd ask, attempting to touch my hand. I made sure to keep my arms close to me, held fast to my backpack. I was incredibly tense, and every muscle in my body was screaming. I sorely regretted wearing a tank top, as I could feel his eyes on me. He started telling me how pale skin is beautiful, since you can see the rope burns and the bruises better. The way he said it sent chills down my spine, and the anxious knots forming in my stomach grew tighter. He asked me if I was a virgin. Then he asked me if I fantasized about rape, and if I'd like to try out rape play. Wide-eyed in disbelief, I turned my gaze away from the dirt path and looked at him. He was smiling, a creepy, childish sort of smile that was just chilling. I kept silent and quickened my pace. He felt too close, far too close. I wanted to run. He could probably see the fear in me at this point. There was no hiding it. But then I saw another pair of scouts were just ahead of us. I ran to them, telling them that the four of us should group up and all go together. The other scouts looked at Danny confused, who just met their gaze with a silent glare. I was just glad someone else other than Danny was there. The four of us went up the mountain, and I tried to keep close to the other two boys, as far from Danny as possible. Upon reaching the end of the trail and regrouping with the others, the two Boy Scouts offered to switch partners to descend the mountain path. Danny looked downright upset, angry even. He was looking at me as if he were betrayed, but I didn't care if I pissed him off. I accepted the offer of switching partners and was able to get back down to camp in relative peace. On the way down, the Boy Scout I was with asked me if Danny had been bothering me or something, but I lied. I said that he wasn't bothering me too much. After all, I was 19. I thought it would be pathetic to get distressed about some weird 15-year-old kid. I figured that, so long as I stuck with the other guys, I'd be fine. But then, that night, I was alone in my tent. Everyone else got to sleep in pairs of 2 or 3, but since I was the only girl, I had to be alone in my tent. It's always a little creepy, being alone and isolated in the forest, away from everyone else. The scoutmasters insisted my tent be far away from the boys' tents, so that they wouldn't bother me. But it only put me in a more vulnerable, isolated position. I sorely wished I'd been closer to the protection of the rest of the group. Late at night, I heard rustling outside. I figured it was just a deer or elk or something, as it usually was, and went back to sleep. But then I heard my tent opening. Opening my eyes, I peeked through the crack in my sleeping bag to see what it was. And there, I saw the white of an eye looking back at me. looking through the opening of my small tent. It was Danny, staring at me. I froze, holding my breath. I held my dad's hunting knife close to me, hiding in my sleeping bag, not moving a muscle, pretending to be asleep, ready to fight at any moment should he take one step into my tent. But he didn't do anything. He just stared at me, breathing heavily and muttering incoherently to himself, "Are you there?" At least, that's what I think I heard him saying. Eventually, after what felt like an hour, he left. The next morning, exhausted, I caught naps when and if I could, and kept close to the other scouts in my group. It was difficult to maintain my calm and cool composure. The scout leaders were a little frustrated with me, since it seemed like I wasn't paying much attention to their instructions, but at this point, I didn't much care for it. I was always on some level of alert, as Danny would sometimes creep up behind me and caress my neck, or play with and try to smell my hair. And every night, Danny was there, watching. One night, he went digging through my backpack, looking for something. But unfortunately for him, I kept all my clothes and personals tucked away with me in my sleeping bag. He left with nothing. I grew up in rough situations and circumstances, so I always felt like I can always rely on myself. Asking for help was never an option as a kid. Asking for help meant you were weak, so it hardly even occurred to me. I was prepared to tough it out for the rest of the week. But a little over halfway through the week, Danny was called away by the scout masters and sent home. I got the feeling that the Boy Scout that helped me before saw what he was doing and sent in a complaint about him to the staff, as while everyone else was confused and happily saying goodbye, he just crossed his arms firmly and stared as Danny left. Danny looked so bewildered and confused by it all, like he didn't understand what he did to deserve being kicked out of camp. It was so strange. I tried my best to forget about it, and the rest of the week went off without a hitch. But the more I think back on it, the more I realize how damn freaky and bizarre that kid really was. I fear he may end up being some kind of serial rapist or something when he grows up. But all I know for certain is that he was very disturbed. I'm just glad my dad told me, although knives weren't allowed at this camp, to take his hunting knife with me. My father insisted I keep it for protection, and I don't regret it. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe so you can catch all of my future content. You can also like my Facebook page if you'd like to stay up to date on any announcements for either of my channels. I will be trying to put out a video for Fear Your Maker this week. Things have just been really crazy at work. I really appreciate all your guys' support. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.